Good morning. Good morning. See. Let's see what I got here. Am I live? All right. I think I am live. I don't see anybody on just yet. So let me just give it a second. Oh, there's somebody. Good morning, Sonia. Happy Monday, everybody. Today we are going to be talking a lot about intermittent fasting, mostly because it has been popping up a ton on my feed in the CrossFit space, other athletes doing it. I've seen it. I mean, honestly, fasting has been around for centuries, for years, centuries. And I think that there are some, things that I want to discuss in terms of, is it something that you should be doing? Where is their application or, pros and cons of it? All the nitty gritty about fasting and my own personal opinions on things like this. I am somebody who has in the past dabbled with fasting, but quite frankly, I know that I was abusing it. It was more so like I was trying to figure out how to, oh, shoot. I don't want to restart. Something's going on. Hold on a second. Oh, okay. There I am. For some reason, I was just losing connection. All right, guys, if you are on today, we are going to be talking all about fasting because if you are like me, like I was trying to say, this might have gotten cut off. It is really easy not to get distracted when we see, especially when we see, high-end athletes or other professionals that are well reputable are like talking about this new protocol, or not even a new protocol, but why they're using it. And today I want to go over some of the things about fasting, how it's, positive and negative and all of that stuff. And I know that for a lot of you guys, this isn't just about the scale. I could talk a little bit about how fasting actually works for fat loss, but for a lot of you guys, what sucks you in is the other benefits that people talk about with fasting, this autophagy and inflammation and, better gut health and the reset and just feeling more clear-headed. There's all of these other things that people are talking about that you can get benefits of from fasting. And today I just want to talk about it because, like I said, it just seems like it's trending again, especially in the CrossFit world, as a way to remove inflammation, improve recovery, and specifically to increase autophagy. But is it actually doing what people think it is? Or are we just confusing correlation with causation? And I'm going to talk a lot about different things with fasting. So let's talk a little bit about why fasting is feeling so popular again right now, why we're seeing it pop up a little bit more. Is here's what you're hearing. It reduces inflammation and you're tired of joint pain. All right. It increases autophagy. Do you even know what autophagy is? Okay. So going into autophagy, it's our body's ability to, obviously, let me go ahead and pull up the definition for you. It's cell turnover, cell repair. Okay. It's your body's natural process of housekeeping. It's what actually helps your body remove damaged cells and create new ones. Okay. So this is benefits. They say that autophagy is what helps you prevent cancer and other different types of comorbidities. All right. So it's autophagy. It's metabolic health. Okay. People talk about that. I think that for a lot of people, it's a feeling of like it's productive. It gives you something that you can say that you're doing that's structured. And as I mentioned earlier, is that some people say that it does help you with fat loss. And I want to explain that these are the things that are pulling you in and why intermittent fasting might not be the solution for these things. All right. So here's why women get sucked in. Like I mentioned, you're feeling pain, you're in joint pain. Maybe you're having, irregular periods or really, really rough periods. Maybe fat loss is slow. Maybe you feel puffy. Maybe your recovery is feeling worse. Not to mention all the things people talk about with hormones. Maybe you're like, oh, maybe my hormones will be better. Maybe you feel like you need some kind of a reset. You're like, need to get more like, we feel like we need to remove everything in order to get everything clear-headed again, right? And maybe you just want a feeling of like you have control and structure in your diet, and intermittent fasting is something that you can feel like gives you that. But here's the important thing. Even though it feels productive, doesn't mean that it's actually going to be helpful. Okay. So It might feel like you're doing something right, but it actually might be working against you. Okay. So I know I did a little bit of a tangent here and I talked a little bit about autophagy, but I am going to go a little bit more into this. I'm talking about some of the science behind it because that's probably the first thing we want to talk about. Now, one of the things I'm going to be mentioning here, I want to mention before I get into this, is that I don't want to, so there are some people that use fasting for purposes outside of health and body composition. If you are someone that practices some kind of a fasting protocol for religion, for spiritual purposes, for medical testing, those are totally different applications of fasting. Okay. So this is talking about, I want to improve my hormone health, my metabolic health, my inflammation markers, my body composition. This is the stuff that I want to get into. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is autophagy. And what's more important for autophagy, which is calorie restriction. So as I already kind of explained, is that autophagy is your body's natural cellular cleanup process. Damaged proteins get broken down, cells get recycled, and it's very, very important for longevity, preventing any kind of cancers and things like that. But here is like the biggest nuance about autophagy, okay? Most of the research is done on rodents, so we don't even actually have that. Most of the research shows that the benefits of, or the true cause of autophagy comes from calorie restriction, and it's done in starvation conditions, and it's not necessarily time restricted feeding that is actually causing the issue or causing the change. Not to mention, I want to take a step back here and talk about how I said this already, but I'm going to say it again. Autophagy is your body's natural cellular cleanup process. Your body naturally does this. So why are we trying to force it? Why do we have to force this? So before I even get into fasting, I want to stop for a second and talk about this mere fact. Why are we trying to speed up something that should be naturally occurring in our body? Because it's not naturally happening now. So why is it not naturally happening? Okay, because a lot of people don't have to trigger autophagy for it to happen because it happens naturally. Okay, and I want you to sit on that and think about that because I'm going to go over some other things as we get going. Because when we're thinking about triggering something, we should probably be thinking about wondering why our body's not naturally doing it anyways. And is intermittent fasting really going to get to the root cause of why we're in this issue or in dealing with this problem? And this is my biggest frustration, especially with the athletes I see that are promoting intermittent fasting. Okay. So the key point here is what I want you to understand when I'm talking about autophagy in regards to fasting, in regards to triggering it, it's the calorie restriction that is known to be the strongest trigger for autophagy. Okay. So whether or not you fast or you're eating in a calorie deficit, you're going to be triggering autophagy. Okay. Long-term energy deprivation is what causes autophagy. And you can stimulate autophagy in a number of ways. Exercise, especially with resistance training. In fact, better sleep is another way to trigger autophagy. Heat and cold exposure, and then watching overall metabolic stress. Fasting is just one way of impacting the calorie restricted state of creating autophagy. So if you want to get that benefit, it can help you. However, so can monitoring your calorie intake. And I'm going to dive more into this because guess what? Autophagy can also become damaging. Too much autophagy can actually be bad for the system. So we have to actually ask ourselves, do we need more autophagy? Why are we forcing something when we don't actually know what's going on in our body? Okay. Let's talk about the recovery problem. All right. Here's where we have to look at the overall stress that fasting can cause on our bodies. If you are a CrossFitter, especially if you are over 35, this has nothing to do with your age, by the way. When I say over 35, even over 30, this has everything to do with so many other factors in your life as you are in the ages of 30, 40, and beyond, okay? Along with the recovery problem of, are you also doing high intensity CrossFit training, all right? CrossFit is going to elevate your cortisol. In fact, not even just CrossFit, but that's one thing. And high intensity training is going to raise your cortisol levels. It's going to increase muscle protein breakdown. It's going to require glycogen replenishment, and it does require essential adequate amino acids, right? So if we are now stacking fasting on top of that, fasting also is going to trigger elevated cortisol. So while your body is going to get the response to create or to start the process of autophagy just from exercise, now we're adding extra or fasting on top of it, which could make it worse. Elevated hunger happens, and then we end up getting cravings later or crashes later because you're delaying post-workout fueling. This impairs your recovery. Muscle retention becomes compromised, and not to mention, sometimes your sleep is impacted. These are all things that you have to realize are negatively impacting you. As I mentioned, your age doesn't have anything to do with it, but the fact that your training isn't the only area where you're stressed does, okay? The fact that you also might be perimenopausal does. The fact that you are trying to juggle your career, your family, and now trying to figure out how to keep your brain functioning on 0 calories is also a stressor. And this also leads to sometimes having a hard time getting enough nutrients in if you are not tracking your calories and not making sure that you're getting enough protein and carbs, okay? So fasting in our population of CrossFitters, especially in that 30 plus club, could also end up leading to underfueling, and it's just people disguising it as biohacking, all right? It actually ends up causing more stress and can even cause some hormone dysregulation, all right? I got a lot of thoughts on fasting, and this is all kind of I just put a bunch of notes down. So if it feels like I'm jumping around a little bit, that's because I have a lot to cover. Let's talk a little bit also about the relationship with food piece. Okay. So this is huge. All right. Many of you have been on so many different diets, followed so many different diet trends. Fasting is going to be one more thing. It's just one more, and now it's a socially acceptable way to restrict your calories. So somebody chooses to eat healthier at a restaurant, and they're like, or they're tracking their food at a restaurant and they're crazy. But someone is like, I don't eat breakfast. That's normal. Like, you get what I'm saying here? Like, let's talk about the relationship with food piece, okay? It can also, as I mentioned earlier in this message or in this podcast episode, is it can be a way for people to feel good about undoing overeating. That was me at one point. I was stuck in a little bit of a cycle, and I had read, oh my God, back then the book was called, I think it was called The Warrior Diet. And I had been like, oh, well, I guess I'm going to just fast. I'm going to eat this big meal like the warriors did, and then I'm going to like just fast afterwards. No, I was just trying to restrict myself, and I knew what I was doing, right? Okay. It also becomes a control mechanism and a response to guilt. Not to mention, how do you, whenever I think about nutritional changes and we're talking about what we're doing, do we ever think about how we would present this to our children, right? Sorry, mommy's not eating breakfast and lunch because she's trying to trigger autophagy in her inflamed body. And she's not allowed to eat breakfast and lunch because she's only allowed to have one meal a day. Like, what are we teaching our kids, right? What are we teaching our kids here? Okay. So your relationship with food is going to get passed down to your children. This is just one more unacceptable diet trend that you are teaching your children. All right. So I think that for a lot of people, fasting can feel productive because you're like, I'm doing something, but it's not. Okay. It's just temporarily reducing intake, but it doesn't ever teach you what actually matters more. Okay. Matters more: portion awareness, energy regulation, balanced meal building, and satiety cues, right? Your body at some point while you're fasting is going to be giving you hunger cues. Now, there can be something to be said about having structured meals and also being able to feel hungry and not eating right away, but you don't have to go through long periods of fasting in order for you to do that, okay? Now we're going to get into some more stuff. All right. Correlation versus causation. And now I'm going to talk about some of the things I'm seeing on social media. I did this 36-hour fast, and here are my results. Lower inflammation, lower this, lower that. I did a 72-hour fast, and here's my results, okay? Correlation is not the same thing as causation. All right. So when I say correlation versus causation, things that are correlated are like it's summertime and I eat more ice cream, right? Maybe that's a correlation because it's hot out, right? Now, if I was to say that if I was down to also say I gain weight in the summertime, and I look back at the data and I see that between the months of June to August, I eat more ice cream than I did in the months of May to June and September to December, I could technically put a study out and say, I recently did a study and noticed that, when I eat ice cream in the summer, I gain weight. When in reality, the ice cream might not have been the problem. Maybe I wasn't working out as much because I was vacationing more and I wasn't moving as much and my calories were higher. Okay. That is what it is. Maybe the ice cream was putting me into a calorie surplus. So the causation was the calorie expenditure change or the calorie intake change, not the ice cream. Okay. It's the same thing here. Correlation, not causation. People associate fasting with reduced inflammation. And I see this specifically in these athletes. Okay. So they're like, I'm going to go on this 36 or 72-hour fast. In this time, they're like, all I'm doing is walking. I'm sleeping more. I'm recovering more. Okay. I'm not doing any of my hard training. My gut is not processing food. I'm literally letting my central nervous system recover. Okay. It wasn't fasting that actually caused the issue. It was the calorie change, lower training volume, allowing your body to reset. It did not reduce the inflammation. Not to mention, a lot of people, like if you were also eating a lot of processed foods, maybe you're cutting all of that stuff out. If you were drinking alcohol, now you're not doing that. If when you're fasting, you're not snacking as much, maybe you're doing that, right? These things all change. And I'm talking not just about the short-term acute fasting protocols, but also those people, maybe you're somebody that does it long-term. Maybe you do fasting, every day. Maybe you do like the 16-8 or whatever it is. You do that you only eat between these hours. Is it the fasting or is it the changes that happen from the calorie restriction that fasting creates? Lower body fat lowers inflammation, right? So there are indirect effects of calorie restriction that get actually masked as fasting as a solution. So I want you to realize that it's not fasting that is magic. Now, let's talk about when fasting can be useful, because maybe you're someone's like, but I've been like doing this for a while and it's working for me. Okay. I'm not telling you that it's not working for you. I just want to give you the education on why it's working for you so that you understand what matters most. Fasting can be very helpful for some people, especially if your schedule if you're somebody that has like a very, very crazy schedule, it can be easier for you than to stay consistent than trying to figure out what you're going to eat for 4 meals a day, right? If you're somebody that like ends up just grabbing random things because of that busy schedule, and you're like, I'm just not going to eat between these hours, you might restrict your calories naturally, right? It could help you if it's just like a natural part of your sleep circadian rhythm that you like just tend to feel better when you don't eat between these times. That can be helpful. It simplifies adherence for a lot of people. It's a lot easier when you're like, I'm only eating 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day or whatever. Mostly its primary uses are controlling calorie intake in a way. It can sometimes help with digestion for someone who does tend to overeat a lot. But again, it could also negatively impact digestion because and actually nutrient absorption, because if you're now condensing the only time that you're able to eat to 1 or 2 meals a day, your body might not be absorbing all of those nutrients the way that it could as if it was breaking them down throughout the day. So I got a lot of things I'm going to start to talk about that. But here's where we have to watch out for things is fasting needs to be timed specifically for those of you guys that do training, well, it has to be time for two things: optimizing sleep and optimizing training and recovery. So those two things matter more. Otherwise, it just becomes one more stressor. It has to have a strategy. So for a lot of you guys that do fasting, I would say that you should be within an hour or two of waking up, you should be getting your training session in. So that you're not, because I think people only associate physical activity as stress that requires energy, whereas mental stimulation does as well. And the longer you're awake, the more glucose your body is burning. So I would say if you're somebody that wakes up and you work out, that should be within an hour. You should be eating a post-workout meal right afterwards. So that would be like how you break your fast. If your training goes beyond 60 minutes or it has more than one piece, you should probably be breaking that fast a little bit earlier in your training to keep training productive. Okay. So that's really, really important. You also have to look at your body because insulin sensitivity does play a factor here. And if you notice that your blood sugar is dropping in your sessions, that might not be the most productive thing for you to get the most out of your sessions, regardless if you're a beginner in the gym or you are a more advanced athlete. Making sure that you feel best in your training is important. And if fasting is something that you're trying to stick to and it's not feeling great, that's important to know. You need to make sure that you are not adhering to a protocol that is going to negatively impact that. The other thing that you have to look out for is sleep. I have some people that I know that disclosed to me that they were doing some fasting protocols. They were like eating their last meal at like 3 or 4, and then they were like going to the gym and training and then going home and not eating afterwards. Again, that post-workout meal needs to happen. And this woman that I'm thinking of in particular was like, I'm up all night. I can't sleep. I'm peeing all night. I'm like, it's because your cortisol's through the roof. You need to make sure that you are prioritizing good sleep hygiene. And part of that is making sure that your body is getting enough nutrients to allow for deep sleep. So you want to make sure of that as well. All right. So let's talk about nutrient intake a little bit and digestion, because this is really, really important. I really want to talk a little bit about if I were to give you my opinion on what I feel like would be best for meal timing, whether it comes to if you're looking to improve autophagy, digestive health, because I like to say that meal timing does have like its place. It doesn't have to be, it's not like it's not a perfect thing. It's not a one size fits all approach, but this is like the most optimal. This would be the most optimal meal timing strategy for you. And it's because of the migrating motor complex. So ideally, fasting does occur between your meals. So this allows your body, your gut, to clear any residual food. It supports gut motility, but can also have the same benefits of the intermittent fasting in terms of calorie restriction, autophagy, how your body learns to regulate blood sugar and all that kinds of stuff. And ideally, what we should be looking for is, this is like what we've heard for years, right? Spacing out your meals 3 to 4 hours apart. Okay, this allows for, I feel like, best nutrient breakdown. So when we think about making sure that your body is actually getting the most bang for your buck from the nutrients that you're taking in. So example, I could eat 120 grams of protein in one meal, but that's a lot for my gut to try and break down and digest. So some of that protein is likely not going to get absorbed. My body will probably just end up pooping some of it out. That's just a natural thing. The whole myth, there's a myth of 30 grams per protein per meal. I don't want you guys getting stressed about that, but it's just ideally that we're spacing nutrients out. We're spacing fiber out. Also for like people that like you eat this meal of like a bunch of fiber and protein and you're bloated and gassy, right? That's your body telling you a little bit too much at once. Let's taper back a little bit. But I think that every 3 to 4 hours is what is best recommended for best nutrient absorption, best benefits, and that's going to really help you. You don't need to be doing any kind of long-term fasting to help with that kinds of stuff. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning and kind of go into the final piece of today's episode, which I know was a little bit messy. I feel like I was a little bit all over the place today. I had a lot to talk about with this. Is the autophagy thing. All right. Autophagy happens naturally in your body, right? Your body naturally does this process when we work out, when you break down muscle tissue. when you sleep, when you do go through periods of fasting, right? Like, so overnight. Um, However, what really actually reduces inflammation? Because if you're reading this or you're listening to this, I shouldn't say reading this, you guys are likely like, okay, I want to get leaner. I want to feel less puffy, but I'm also tired of feeling inflamed all the time, right? We need to make sure that we're managing inflammation. And managing inflammation is not going to be done with fasting, okay? You can fast and you're not going to get any benefits from it if you're still running on 4 hours of sleep, you're under eating or you're overeating, you're never taking any kind of recovery days or rest days, you're slashing yourself to the ground after every single CrossFit workout. You're not getting enough protein. You're just not strength training. You're not getting enough fiber. You're not getting enough nutrients in. You're not getting enough omega-3s in. And you haven't actually reduced body fat enough, because guess what the biggest marker of inflammation comes from? Your body fat percentage. Too low, too high is going to impact your body fat percentage, especially for females because of its effect on estrogen levels. Too low, too high, estrogen levels go a little bit wonky. So you've got to get your body fat percentage into a healthy range. I'm not saying that you need to be having a six-pack, abs, but you need to make sure that you're in a healthy place with body fat percentage, okay? If you truly want to reduce inflammation, you want longevity, you need to be working on building muscle, fueling appropriately, sleep, and avoiding chronic undereating. All right. These are the big markers here. And it's the not sexy stuff, because guess what? It's easy to be like, I did this 32-hour fast or 36-hour fast or 2-hour fast. Let's also talk about this. Okay. You do this 36-hour fast and you feel so good afterwards for a day, maybe 2 days, maybe 3 days, right? But then what happens? It's the same cycle again. That is not what you want. Do you want to acutely feel better? Okay, fasting is kind of like taking Advil. It's going to make you feel better short term, but if we don't find the trigger for the headaches and we keep getting the headaches, we're not going to get anywhere. Okay, so you need to take a couple of steps back. And if you are applying fasting along with different things and you're feeling really good about it, by all means, like, it does have those benefits, right? You can get those autophagy benefits. However, it's important to recognize that it's not the fasting that's causing it. It's the calorie restriction, and asking yourself long term, have you been restricting your calories for too long? Because at some point, autophagy is going to catch up with you. And as I mentioned, there can be a negative. And maybe you've experienced that. Maybe fasting worked for you at one point and it's not working for you now. Okay. These are all red flags and why I don't believe in doing these extreme changes. Okay. And funny enough, somebody mentioned to me, she goes, we've been doing fasting, since the dawn of time. Our ancestors fasted. I'm like, yeah, well, our ancestors also took a shit in the woods in a hole. Like, are we going to do that too? Our ancestors lived very different lifestyles. Brain stimulation, dopamine was different. Everything was different. Okay. We cannot compare ourselves to where we were then. I could even go into how this plays a factor in spiritual fasting, because if I'm being honest, thinking back to spiritual fasts of those times, there wasn't any other stimulation. There wasn't all the different things that people get exposed to, that they're addicted to, right? Food was the only pleasure, and well, maybe sex too. But nowadays I think there are so many other things that people can be fasting from than food spiritually that would probably connect them more to their faith and Jesus than starving themselves of sugar or all these different things. But, again, like I said, fasting has its place in the spiritual world as well. But I'm sure if you're listening to that and you are spiritual, I'm guilty of this myself. I'm like, I could definitely put down Instagram sometimes. So some closing thoughts today. I just honestly really want to make sure that you guys understand that you don't need to be doing fasting. Fasting is a correlated cause of any kind of inflammation changes, not a direct cause of them, along with body composition changes. If you truly want to learn how to build a body and have a healthy relationship with food, you don't need extremes, okay? You need structure, you need routine, you need systems. And if that's you, feel free to reach out to me. You can DM me, you can send me a message. There's a link in my show notes for you guys to set up a free strategy session with me. But I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. Let me see if there's anybody else on here still watching. Does anybody have any questions about fasting or anything along these lines? Good morning, Kenneth. I just saw you pop on. All right. Then I am going to hop off. I will see you guys all on the next episode. Bye.